Wild West was filled with some of the craziest, ruthless killers, but none of them matched the deadly charm of Doc Holliday. Gambler, gunslinger, and a living legend, he was a man who lived life like he was already dead. But what made him the most dangerous man in the Wild West? Let's find out. Turning into a deadly gunslinger, John Henry Doc Holliday was neither a ruthless killer nor even into chaos. He was born in Griffin, Georgia, in 1851 to a rather well-sophisticated and respected major. His father, Henry Burroughs Holliday, was a war veteran and quite a respected member of the community and Georgia's society. John was well-educated, refined, and even fluent in multiple languages like Latin, Greek, and French, while also becoming a doctor of dental surgery in 1872. It seemed like Mr. Henry turned his son into a polished professional instead of a rowdy gangster in the land of rough cowboys. However, life took a cruel turn for the Doc when his mother died of tuberculosis when he was just 15. Shortly after himself, Doc was also diagnosed with the same exact disease, and the doctor told him that he wouldn't live too long. That's where the beginning of his transformation came, where he lost the fear of death. What would you do if you were to find out that you don't have much longer to live? Well, for most people, that would turn into a motivated ride of finding out the secrets of the world or living their lives to the fullest. Tuberculosis wasn't just a sickness for Doc Holliday, but rather, it became the very core of pushing him towards reckless choices. From there, he moved to the west, seeking rather drier climates that would potentially prolong his life. But there he found himself in something else entirely. In Westward, there were lots of gambling, gunfights, and the bloody legend of the frontier. In other words, just surviving here was more of a matter of luck. This is also the place where Doc Holliday's transformation started occurring, from dentist to dealer. In Dallas, Texas, Doc first tried to set up his dental practice. However, constant coughing fits ruined his chances of success. Who would like to be in possession of a dentist who is always coughing in pain, right? Well, with fewer options, this guy turned to gambling. This profession was probably more dangerous than his disease because if he lost everything, he would not even have a place to stay anymore. But what set Doc apart wasn't just his skill with cards or gambling, but rather his reputation for violence. In the room, Holliday wasn't the strongest, tallest, fastest, or even the smartest guy, but his fearlessness made him terrifying. After all, what could threaten a dying man in this world? Reports spread quickly, and at this point the infamous Doc could handle himself with both a revolver and a knife. He was becoming thinner and paler day by day while also coughing up blood. But when the cards turned rough, no other cowboy was there to test him. Everyone was afraid of him. In fact, early in Dallas, Doc also had his first public gunfight with the saloon owner. Thankfully, no one was killed, but everyone found out that Holliday was a madman. From there, he was traveling across Texas and beyond, leaving behind a trail of gambling tables along with corpses. If anyone would test him or be unfair to him, he would kill them and move on to the next victims. But what exactly was the dark side of Doc Holliday? You see, Doc was well educated and dressed when sober. He was soft-spoken and always had a calm demeanor, even in the roughest situations. However, after getting a few drinks down his system, he still carried himself like a gentleman but killed like a gunslinger. He would become quick-tempered and often drunk, resorting to violence over the smallest things. An interesting story unfolded when he killed a fellow gambler named Ed Bailey. According to the famous lawmaker Wyatt Earp, Holliday was once playing poker with a well-liked local man named Ed Bailey. However, Holliday caught Bailey monkeying the dead wood, or discard pile, which was a trick against the rules in poker. From there, he reminded Bailey to play poker, which was a polite way to tell him to stop cheating. After some time, Bailey got angry and went for his pistol, but Holliday whipped out a knife from his breast pocket and caught Bailey just below the brisket, or what we call the upper chest. On the stop, Bailey died, and Holliday, new to the town, was detained in his room at the Planters Hotel. Some reports say that after killing him, he also opened the stomach of the gambler, and another time, he nearly decapitated a man with his blade, as violence followed him like a disease in his lungs. But even among the flaws, the Doc had one thing that was quite rare in most outlaws, and it was loyalty. Meeting Wyatt Earp. Doc's life changed forever when he crossed the path of Wyatt Earp in Fort Griffin, Texas. Wyatt Berry. Stap Earp was a lawman in the American West and was involved in many gunfights during his time. At first, Wyatt wasn't sure what to think of the Doc, as he was a gambler, drinker, and a killer. But Doc provided information that helped Wyatt capture one of the most dangerous outlaws. And from that day on, the duo became unbeatable.
Doc, you ought to be in bed. What the hell are you doing this for anyway?
Wyatt Earp is my friend.
Hell, I got lots of friends.
You see, Tombstone was a booming silver town in the 1880s and was filled with outlaws, cowboys, and saloons. The Earp brothers consisted of Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan. They all came to establish law and order, but standing in their way was the infamous Clanton-McClory gang, also known as the Cowboys. This time, Doc sided with the Earps, and not only did he become a friend, but a deputy marshal when needed. At this point, he was already sick and coughing up blood daily. But when it came to actually being a gunslinger, all of the symptoms went away. Ike Clanton and his gang were constantly threatening to kill the Earps, along with Holliday, and tension brewed. On October 26, 1881, one of the most famous gunfights in American history was ignited in the OK Corral. Just think about this. The Earps were in the black, walking down Fremont Street, and on their side, we had Doc Holliday in a gray coat, shotgun hidden underneath it, calmly whistling a tune. On the other hand, we had the Clantons and McClorys, armed and ready for a showdown. Virgil Earp called for peace and told them to leave their guns, but in a blink, gunfire erupted. In just 30 seconds, more than 30 shots were fired, and Doc blasted Tom McClory with a shotgun at point-blank range. He then pulled his revolver and also shot Frank McClory in the stomach. All of these bullets were flying past Wyatt, grazing his coat, while Morgan and Virgil were both wounded. When the dust settled, the three cowboys were dead, and these were Billy Clanton, Tom McClory, and Frank McClory. The Earps were bloodied but alive, while Doc was pale, coughing, and trembling. But even in this state, he was the most dangerous man in Tombstone. Before we dive into what happened after the OK Corral, don't forget to subscribe for more Wild West history and untold stories. You don't want to miss what happens next, because Doc's story has barely started. Vendetta Ride. The OK Corral didn't end in a bloodshed. Rather, it fueled it further because the cowboys wanted revenge. Months later, Morgan Earp was assassinated while playing billiards, and Virgil was shot and badly wounded. Looking at his brothers, Wyatt Earp was furious, and Doc Holliday rode with him on what became known as the Earp Vendetta Ride. Together, the duo hunted down every man suspected of killing Morgan. Frank Stillwell was their famous victim, who was shot with bullets at a train station. Then, Florentino Cruz was shot dead after confessing to the involvement. In the desert near Iron Springs, Wyatt and Doc then gunned down Curly Bill Brocious, who was one of the most feared cowboys. For more than a year, Doc rode at Wyatt's side, turning it into something more than just friendship. This became a brotherhood between them. He was a grim reaper on horseback and was coughing blood between the shootouts. However, Doc was still killing with deadly precision. It was 1882 when newspapers started calling Doc Holliday the most dangerous man in the West, and it wasn't because he was the fastest gunslinger. Bat Masterson and others claimed that he wasn't anything special. The only thing that made him the strongest was that he didn't simply give up. Death had already claimed Doc with tuberculosis, and he lived every day knowing that his own disease would kill him sooner or later. So instead of hesitating and living life like he was a rat, he never hesitated to pull the trigger on his enemies, making him lethal and almost immortal. Even John Ringo, the infamous outlaw, is rumored to have met his end at Doc's hand because Ringo was found dead with a bullet wound to the head. However, the official cause remains debated, while most people believe it was Doc who pulled the trigger.
Come on. Come on. Oh, Johnny. Come on!
Towards the end of the 1880s, the railroad contractor James H. Kiner hired Doc Holliday to motivate the proprietors of dozens of gambling and saloon tents to leave a 41-mile stretch of railroad line that he and another contractor were constructing between Glenwood Springs and Aspen. The saloon tent workers were always drunk, and it was causing them a lot of trouble, so Kiner wanted to deal with the problem himself. At first, Kiner heard that Holliday was hired by a group of men who wanted to fend off others who had staked their ownership to the nearby coal deposit that they were claiming. So, when he pointed out to Holliday to help him, without hesitation, Holliday told Kiner that he could do it for $250. After a while, Kiner was told that every saloon and gambling trend along the line had disappeared, except one that was in a draw a half-mile from the line. The next day, Big Nose Kate actually met Doc Holliday and, without a word, paid him the full $250 amount, the tragic end. But as they say, everyone who goes up must come down, and the same was the case with Doc Holliday. Despite surviving several other gunfights and countless shootouts, he couldn't escape his greatest enemy, his own lungs. By the 1880s, his health was failing fast, and then he moved to Colorado, where he hoped that the mountain air would help him. However, even moving to the beautiful scenery couldn't help him, as his tuberculosis only worsened. On November 18, 1887, at just the age of 36 years old, Doc Holliday died in a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Some people state that his last words were said to be, "This is funny." And perhaps he found it funny that he was dying in bed rather than the dusty streets of the West, which he had always hoped to do. In the end, Doc wasn't the fastest gun nor the strongest fighter, but he was the one man that everyone feared crossing. Because when you face Holliday, you weren't facing a man, but a god that was dead himself. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell icon if you're looking for more Wild West videos.